I'm just going to find out where Glenn is. So we've still got people joining us. So I'm just going to mute myself for the moment. Glenn's trying to get the link to work on his phone, so we'll just hold on. But the numbers are still going up, so we'll just we've still got people joining us, so we'll keep the things open for the time being. Here we go. Blimey, Glenn, have you had your haircut?
That was a quick trip to the barbers.
Awesome.
Right. Sorry, everybody. We will explain what that was about. Thank you. We'll start the meeting now. So thank you all for joining this webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Helen Ryan. I'm the Assistant National Secretary for the Arts and Entertainment Division. Joining me on the call is Glenn Keane, who is the Secretary of the Commercial West End Theatres Branch, Joe Packer, who is one of the members of the negotiating team, Chris Davis, who's also a member of the negotiating team, Claire Hartley, who we managed to co-opt on recently, and we will be co-opting somebody on as well from a Wigs Hair and Makeup as well. So I've just got to sort that out with those groups. We've also got Jane Roger, who's an organising official who works in the West End, Commercial West End branches, and we have BECTU Comms, who's Zoe Barnes. She's an organising official, and she will be doing the effectively driving at the meeting. So just some house rules. This is being recorded and will go on to the webinar behind the membership login. Therefore, when we read out any questions that are put into the Q&A box, or any comments that are in that Q&A box, we will not be mentioning any names, so that we keep anonymity going, so that's fine, so don't worry about that. The other thing that we will be doing through this, we have 3 polls that we will be putting to you. The polls are online. They are totally anonymous. We don't know, we can't, it's not stored. All we actually get is the actual results. So please, when you do vote, we're asking everybody to do like the honest vote. Don't feel pressured into voting one way or another. So this meeting has been called to deal with one specific issue, and that is the issue around Sunday working and the SOLT BECTU agreement and the provisions contained in that. The reasons why we did it, and apologies, it was done at very short notice, but the reasons why we did it was I spoke to Wayne Lee from SOLT last week on Thursday, and it's becoming more pressing that they need to draw to a conclusion any of these variations that we've been looking at regarding the SOLT BECTU agreements. And obviously they're conscious that we obviously have to consult our members anyway by consultative ballot, so there's quite a lull. But but they are now starting to up the pressure on wanting to bring these issues to a head and hopefully, if possible, reach some a way forward that is mutually agreeable and we can put out to our members. The big sticking point is Sundays. And I mean, I think with regard to multi-skilling, and as I say, we're not talking about that. We sort of moved that into a different sphere. So this is purely about the Sunday working. And it's clear that, well, the impression that I get, and Glenn shares this view, is that we have been, when we're talking to SOLT and we're saying, you're not going to get Sundays for nothing, you're not going to do this, you can't have permanent variation. I think genuinely SOLT believe it's just me and Glenn making it up. And you know, we're not actually reflecting the fact that you have all told us, our reps are telling us that this is not a popular thing, and I think they just think that we're just saying it just for the sheer fun of it, and that actually you all really gagging to do Sundays and that you all don't want any extra money for doing it and things like that. So I said to SOLT on Thursday, fine, we would do this webinar and we would find what is our bottom line in these negotiations to try and, if there is anywhere, can we move it on, and what is our bottom line? So I don't know whether you want to add any more to that, Glenn, before we launch the first poll, which is quite self-explanatory, I think. But Glenn or Chris or Joe or Claire, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think you know, as long as everybody understands what that bottom line means, and I'm sure we all do. The bottom line is basically, if we vote one way or the other today, that's it. We you know, that will be where we start our trajectory from basically. So if we vote yes, that we're going to, you know, we're all happy to do it, then we'll go back to them and say yes. But if you vote no, then we'll go back and say no, and we won't shift from that position, because that would be what you as a membership have instructed us to do, basically. So that would be, you know, we have to, that's a clear mandate from you guys, whichever way you do it, that we've got your backing and your support. And that's what, you know, that's what we need, basically, because as Helen said, I think they do think that it's just me and Helen sort of stalling, you know, and some of you who know me will know that I've said this before, that, you know, I've been accused of this. Now, this will be the third time I've been accused of it in SOLT negotiations, stalling it for my own purposes, you know, and nothing could be further from the truth, really. But there we go. So that's pretty much what I want to say. Just be aware that, you know, this is important stuff we're talking about, and have a little think about what you want to do and where you want to go, you know, because ultimately there will be repercussions from them or consequences from them for whichever way they want to look at it. But we as a group have got to go forward as a group, not as them thinking it's me and Helen leading some sort of mad charge that we're in our fantasy world, that we're making up just to try and foil their dastardly plans, basically, isn't it?
Right, can I just say that I can see that one attendee's got their hand up. The problem that we've got with the size of this call is we've got over 200 people on this webinar, that if we allow contributions from other attendees, not the panelists, then unfortunately it gets very unruly and we will run out of time and we won't be very focused. So can I just say, if you've got a question, please put it in the Q&A box, and we will either pick it up and answer to you directly, or we'll answer it during the webinar. So if, as I say, if anybody does have any questions, please do it like that. So Zoe, can we launch the first poll, please? The first poll is pretty straightforward. And then it says, would you accept a permanent change to the SOLT BECTU agreement? That means that Sundays are part of the normal working week. So as I say, this is the thing that SOLT are convinced that myself and Glenn are making up your position. So we asked this question. I think we believe we know what the answer is. That's not that's not putting any pressure on you, but we honestly genuinely want to know what people feel. So can you use your voting? You can either vote yes, no, or don't know. So if you can do that, please, and then we will close the vote. By the way, panelists are not able to vote. So just, and the host can't vote either as well. So just so that you actually knew that. So Zoe, are the votes coming in?
Yeah, at the moment we've got 88% of people who have voted. They're still coming up, so just wait.
I think we've got some questions there from people that don't know how to vote from whichever device they're dialing in.
So somebody's just saying it's just popped up. I mean, I don't know. I mean, can you help, Jane? Because I know I'm talking from a laptop. You're talking from you're using a phone, aren't you?
Yeah, if you're on an iPad or a phone, I think you have to press somewhere on the sort of screen, and then it will bring you up the options to do the Q&A and mute and all that sort of thing.
Seems to have kind of evened out now. We've got 94% of people that have voted. 3% have said yes, 92% have said no, and 5% have said don't know.
Okay, so I think that's quite clear that people are not happy with that permanent variation. So Glenn, do you want to go through and what we discussed and the negotiating team discussed last week and the next set of questions?
Christ almighty, that would be a mouthful. Okay, so the next question is about, as far as I can remember, it's about whether we would, is it the time and a half one, or is it this?
No, it's whether we take a Sunday as a normal working day up until 22nd.
So basically what SOLT are asking for is, they're asking for a long-term commitment for us to work for Sundays for free, with no end in sight really, apart from them turning around and saying, well, we're back to 2019 levels, we'll think about it. But even then, you know, they've said to us, and I don't think this is a private, it's not privately they've said to us that they will be seeking Sunday for a vastly reduced payments. And in fact, I think they pretty much said no payment at all in the future, moving forward way past the end of 2022 and going probably 4 or 5 years into the future, as they're asking for, as I can tell. So what we're suggesting is to compromise for that idea, whether we would think it'd be a sensible thing to do, to offer to do it for it'll probably end up being just over a year, I would think, if we get back to work in the autumn, up until 2022, to give them the Sundays for single time for no extra pay, basically. So, I mean, my personal opinion is I think this is probably doable, and only because I think if we don't do something towards it, we'll look like we're trying to be obstructive and we're not trying to get the West End back up and running, which we are. But I don't think we can obviously agree to anything that's open-ended. So we are suggesting that we would look at 2022, and at the point in 2022 where we look at SOLT's books, and it's January 2022, sorry, where we look at the books and look at the agreement, then we would suggest to SOLT that we would revert back to half-time on top for doing Sundays, up to the point where we think then that they would be coming back to a normal box office revenue in either 2022 or May 22, and then I think the next one was May, June, July, August 22. Is that right, Helen?
Yeah.
Those 3 monthly periods so 5 monthly periods from January, basically.
Yeah.
So, go on.
So what I was going to say was that there's just been a couple of questions being put into the thing. We've been very clear with SOLT that the opt-out has to remain. So that's one of the questions. Would it be, about the opt-out? So no, we've been very clear the opt-out has to remain for Sundays working throughout this. So I think the next,
Do you want me to launch that poll, Helen, the temporary variation one?
So yeah, so this next poll is about the temporary variation. So this is saying basically what Glenn has actually outlined, which is, do we do a temporary variation until January 2022, and it would be deemed as part of the normal working week for that period, but being very clear it has to have an end date. So again, you've got yes, no, don't know. There's Glenn, I don't know whether you want to answer one of this query. What about if SOLT proposed to add 2 shows on a Sunday for wardrobe? Would this also include the laundry call? We've made it very clear, haven't we, that all work has to be paid, and it has to be very clear about any buyouts that are done. It has to be clear about what hours are bought out.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with them. We talked about it, I think we talked about it on the last webinar as well, about how we didn't see how they could possibly start calling people in for extra hours for free. They've said in the meetings that they don't particularly want that. What they wanted was this emergency clause thereafter. I'm assuming, and I think, I think we have to assume this, and we have to check it out with SOLT, but for me, I think they're going to have to be paying more. They might not be paying at time and a half, but they might have to be paying more hours at single time if they want the amount of cleaning detail and the amount of sanitation that they think they're going to need. It's going to take longer. It's going to mean longer days, I suppose, for all of us. But it's going to be one of those things they're going to have to pay for. They're not going to get any extra hours for free, as far as we're concerned. So whatever they're going to have to do, it will, like I said, it would be on single time, but it would be more hours.
Okay, Claire?
Can I just say that Sunday's always been an issue for me, because wardrobe and wigs have extra calls every day before the show. So I think one of the problems with Sunday is that, some people might only be going in for one show, but we've already done a whole session of work to get ready for that one show. So a double show Sunday is a 3-session day for us. We have laundry, first show, second show, and even with a single show, we've still got the morning session. So it's still a 2-session day. So, it's one of the things that it's not as if we get any Sunday at all to enjoy with our friends and family, because we've already had to be in. And it's one of the reasons I've not been happy at the idea of Sunday being included in the ordinary working week, because there will always be those extra hours. Even before the COVID excitement happened, there is still a morning session that gets taken up. And I think that's what that question was about, was we're going to be working a 3-session day on single time.
Yeah. Zoe, do we have an answer?
Yeah. So 95% of people have voted, and 53% of people have said yes. 32% of people have said no, and 15% of people said don't know. So I'll end that polling now.
Sorry, what was their figures again? Sorry, 53.
53% said yes, 32% said no, and 15% said don't know.
Okay, right. Okie dokie. Before we go on to, it is simple majorities that we go with on our voting. So that is sort of given us a mandate, albeit not that solid, but I think that message to SOLT is very clear that this is quite marginal. Our membership are quite split. So, but I think we have to go with what we've got. There's a couple of questions in the chat, not the chats, the Q&A. Why can't there be quarterly box office reviews in 2021 if the perfectly fair benchmark is not reached? they have nothing to fear. I mean, that's a question we've asked but was rejected. I don't know whether anybody wants to add to that. No. Is this for both performances and ins and outs, or can we suggest different rates for different calls? I think, Glenn, I don't know whether you want to talk about this. I mean, we talked in our pre-meeting about, well, you know, we've all come up with different ideas and everything else. And the point was, there's so many different things. The reason why we've done it like this on this call today is to try and get simplicity and try and find a way forward. Do you want to add anything to that?
Me, Georgia?
Is it worth, Helen, is it worth clarifying what we're talking about in terms of, we're talking about a 5-day week, and then if people go on to a 6th and 7th day, because obviously they would still be, you know, we're talking about if Sunday was part of a 5-day 40 hours, aren't we? So it's probably it's worth just clarifying that obviously if you were doing a 6th and 7th day, obviously you'd still be on time and a half and double time.
That doesn't work for show staff because they're on a 6-day week anyway.
Making it clear that that's the situation. If there's any confusion.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything else, Glenn?
No, I was just to say, I was just agreeing with Joe basically that we are talking about that. There's questions on you about where's it gone? Would Sunday hires be exempt from this and still pay the premium? The answer we would say is yes, because obviously that's what we've been arguing with SOLT. We've been talking about running shows rather than Sunday hires or anything like that. We haven't touched that. Sundays at work, would there still be another day off? Yes, we are talking about working 6 out of 7 rather than 7 out of 7. So there would be another day off in the week, I would assume. Where's the other one I saw? Equity members are also being asked to lose their Sunday bonus. I think Equity's deal with them is different to ours. I think Helen probably knows more about that than I do, to be honest with you. And as no one says, I'm assuming SOLT are not also discussing raising hourly or show wages. I couldn't afford to lose Sundays based on current pay. I mean, they're not talking about raising hourly or show wages. We have asked them to retain the 9-for-8 bonus for show staff and leave that alone in amongst the other bonuses that they're going to be taken away. But and we did say to them, if they're not going to do that, they would have to raise show rates, and they fell back to their 9-for-8 bonus answer basically. So that's what we're doing there. Is this for both performance and ins and outs, or can we suggest different rates for different calls? Well, it was purely for performance we're talking about. So I'm not saying about, we haven't explored different rates for get outs or anything like that, because that's not technical. Well, it's not what we do, and it's not how it works in the West End so far, is that we haven't really had it. We've never had a get out rate, so you know, it depends when the get out's being done basically. And then, as I said, we are talking about performance, you know, Sunday performances we're talking about, not Sunday get outs or anything like that. We'll have to get to that, I suppose, when we get down to the actual technical details of what we're talking about in the negotiation. But we've got to get them to accept this first, and I'll make sure that they get the idea into their heads that they're not going to be able to walk all over us and just take the Sundays for free.
Yeah. The final part of what we were looking at polling, and then we can come back on to try and answer some of these questions, albeit some of them we're not able to answer because it's all still to be negotiated. It's about, well, once we've got to January 2022, if we've given them Sundays as part of the normal working week for that period of time, and we get to January 2022, would people be willing to accept a further temporary variation of, for example, 0.5t on top, working Sundays, and then it falls into the overall review that Glenn was explaining before about the box office tickets and things. So that's about, well, okay, we've given them so long Sundays for what part of the working week. Would the members give anything more, waiting for the box office sales to come back up? Does anybody, before we launch that, does anybody want to add any more to that?
So this is just making an extension on, so we have a period of time with no extra money for Sunday, and then if the box office hasn't recovered, instead of carrying on not getting a Sunday extra pay, we'd say, well, instead of going straight back up to time on top, we'd be going up to time on, well, just half time on top for this Sunday. Fine.
Yeah, so it's a further temporary variation, so it's not permanent variation. You know, we've made that very, very clear, and I think the first vote made it very clear that that is not going to be acceptable to membership. So,
is there a time limit on this one, Helen? Like
that would be with the other review periods for the rest of the variations to the SOLT BECTU agreement. So that would be based on box office sales in comparison to the 2019 ones, where we're also going to have independent person to verify the figures. So when all the other variations fall away, that would fall away, and then the SOLT BECTU agreement comes back in its entirety. So anybody else want to add anything? Glenn, Claire? No? Joe? Chris? Chris is very quiet. So, sorry, can you launch that poll for me, please? So it's, again, would you agree to a further temporary variation of the SOLT BECTU agreement from January 2022 for Sunday working to attract a premium payment of 0.5t on top of single time? As I say, it's very clear that that goes into the review. I did try writing the question to build that in, but it would have filled the whole page by the time we'd got it to make sense. So that's reasons why we've just left it at that, but that is the intention. So it wouldn't be a permanent change to 0.5. It's still a temporary variation. So there's, whilst we're waiting for the poll, do we have any more of the questions that anybody's willing to answer?
Can I just say also that temporary variation, our intention is for that to kick in January 2022, whatever happens, isn't it?
Sorry?
Our intention is for that 0.5 on top to kick in January 2022, whatever happens.
Yeah.
We give them a year, and then 2022 it goes up to 0.5, and it stays at 0.5 until we get to the point where we agree to go back to what is the current SOLT BECTU agreement as it stands now.
Yeah, that's the intention behind this.
Intention behind all of this,
Yeah. So somebody is asking for clarification about what the opt-out means. Would it actually mean Sundays are optional? Well, that's the opt-out that's already in the SOLT BECTU agreement. That if you want to opt out of Sundays, you do so.
But we have a problem when you're employed by the producers with that, because even though the opt-out is actually in the agreement, you won't get the job if you decide that you can't do Sundays if the show week is Tuesday to Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, put it like this, none of us sitting here on this panel are happy with what we're doing. And I stress that. I'm not happy with doing it as an official. You know, I know Glenn's finding it difficult. I know Joe, Chris and Claire are. But what we're trying to do is find out whether there is a way forward to try and preserve the SOLT BECTU agreement, because otherwise we are in danger of the SOLT BECTU agreement falling away, and then it's everybody up for themselves whilst we rebuild the agreement, and that will potentially take years.
And I think that's a real issue for us as producer employees. Because every time we go for a new job, we'll have to negotiate up from the absolute government minimum, not our minimum that we have in our agreement. And there's about £4 difference on the minimum wages that we have in our agreement than the government minimum pay. So, the agreement's actually been incredibly useful for us as producer employees, but it's just how much we're willing to give back to SOLT to get us up and going, but so they don't stomp all over us forever and ever more.
Yeah. mean, before we get the results, I mean, there's a question here: what happens if there is no agreement and we can't reach an agreement with SOLT? SOLT won't change their position. That's the reasons why I think we're trying to find a compromise, because ultimately, if SOLT come back and just say, well, no, we just want it time for time and that's it, full stop, then at least we can actually go and, because then the press will get it, and at least we can defend our position by saying, well, we tried to negotiate, but SOLT didn't. It's not the ideal position to be in. That's the whole point about negotiation, which is trying to find a way through something, especially at a time when, to be honest with you, we can't threaten them with industrial action, which is quite problematic for us, which is why I think on previous webinars, both Glenn and myself and the other people on the panel have always said that when we are back up and running and things are back to normal, there's going to be payback, and there will be. And that's one promise that I do actually make, that we will go back. And we've told them that. We've told them that you've come for too much already. And when we've got the power, when we've got it back again, then we will get some payback on all of this.
Life's mission to make their lives unbearable.
Sorry?
So I think I said I was going to make it my life mission to make their lives unbearable.
That's true. I won't tell everybody exactly what he did say to he would do to them, but because it is being recorded. But there we go.
So far, do all this without swearing, so we're okay so far. It's difficult to consider any of these changes when we know that the actors and stage management are in their own negotiations with SOLT. I think a lot of us would be happy to agree to these temporary measures. We know it's across the board and not just affecting backstage staff who are often on lower salaries anyway. I think, you know, from what we know, and I'm sure, Helen, you know more about this than I do, but what we know about the equity negotiations, they're not going too well as far as I understand it. You know, the only people who are making a stand, I think, are us and the MU. So, you know, not that I wanna do down the other FEU unions, but I just, you know, there's not much going on there. I think they're taking what they're given, basically, as far as I understand it.
And I don't think the equity Sunday payment is quite as good as the one we have, where we get time on top. I think they get a fixed fee.
£65.
Yeah, so it's not such a big loss. If they lose their Sunday bonus, they're not taking such a big hit as we would be if we lost our Sunday time on top.
I think they're trying to persuade us to take that as well. I think they're in their minds they see that as being the way forward. I think. So.
Just for clarity, Equity and the MU are going through just as tortuous negotiations with SOLT. What's quite interesting is SOLT tries to play us off against each other. So they say to me that BECTU is the sticking point, and they're doing great things with Equity and the MU. So while I'm on the Zoom calls, I send Equity and MU emails, and then I get told, no, it's not going very well, and all the rest of it. So you know, SOLT are trying to play the unions off against each other, but we've become very savvy about that, and we've actually started being far more open with each other. And you know, they are being asked to take a hit as well, and quite a substantial hit. They've got very different agreements to us. I think that's what Claire is actually saying. So before we go into trying to answer some more of these questions that are in the webinar, Zoe, have you got the results?
Yeah, so with the last poll, 53% of people said yes, 38% said no, and 10% said don't know.
Thank you. So I do think that, I mean, we will come back onto some of these questions that are in here, because I think there's some valid things in here that we need to answer. But I think at least we do have an indication on what people say. I think the message that we can put back to SOLT is this would be our bottom line, our very bottom line, because the voting is so close. So if they think like they usually do, oh, that's BECTU's bottom line, so then we'll halve it again. I think they need to get the message, well, actually, no, that's not going to be acceptable. So there's some people talking about, well, if we went public about SOLT not agreeing to 2T on Sundays, are we sure that the public would be on our side, given hospitality and other industries doing it for single time? I mean, that is a point that I have made to SOLT, that yes, there are industries like that, but when they did move to go to Sunday working, then the overall package got changed. So that's the point that we've been making to SOLT, which is you can't just look at basic pay as the wage, because actually it's an overall package. So if you tinker with one part or a number of parts of the package, it actually imbalances the actual real wage that people earn. Although I accept that will get lost in the public domain. So I don't know whether anybody else wants to add anything onto that, but yes, that is an issue. Here's a question, I think. Glenn, you might want to answer that. How would this work with separate theatres, for example, NIMAX, ATG, DMT, etc.? Because sometimes you can earn different wages in different venues or with different companies.
Yeah, they are assuring us that the base wage would still be the basic wage, basically. Like, what's that phrase they keep using? They are, what they say, they keep, what is it?
Preserving
the basic wage, yeah. Yeah, all right. That's, we know what that is. It's full. So the basic wage shouldn't change, other than the fact that it's prorated. So you'd still be paid exactly the same as we are now, but it'd be prorated. Somebody asked me, certainly put on earlier, if we're doing Sundays. But if you're doing Sundays if you're on a show not doing Sundays, doing Monday through to Saturday, your money would be the same whether you're on a show doing Tuesday through to Sunday. So it'd be the same amount of money you should get paid. And there's no difference in that. That's what they're suggesting if we do it for nothing, basically, with no uplift at all. So I think that answers that question about the Sunday. Yeah, the variation. Sorry, hang on. Lost the question.
So how would Sunday at single time affect cost change Sundays?
Well, it will be a 7th day working for most people that were doing the cast change Sundays, because it might be on a Monday if that's your nominated rest day. So I mean, if it's part of your normal week and they're paying single time, then you should be in overtime when you go on to a cast change Sunday or your cast change day. But you won't automatically get time on top if this goes through.
Okay. There's a question here about does this include Sunday special concerts and fit-ups, or is it just for resident shows?
It's just, all we're talking about is run of show Sundays. If your show is doing Sundays as part of its normal working week, then that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about extra Sundays. Anything outside of a 5 or 6 day week would be classed as, in Claire's instance, where she works 6 days a week, that an extra day would be seventh day, and we'd paid at double time. A 6th day and a 7th day would be paid at time and a half and double time respectively, regardless of what days they were if you're working them. So if you're working, let's just say you're working through a Tuesday to Sunday pattern, 5 days that week. Those 5 days paid at single time. Then if you were working the Monday and a Wednesday through the Sunday single pattern, if you then work the Monday and the Tuesday, they would be at time and a half and double time, one or the other. So
what would happen if shows that are currently Monday to Saturday decide that because of low footfall in the West End, they want to change to a Tuesday to Sunday? would that affect doing Sunday concerts and things like that, because it would then become a Monday concert, and most full-timers would be able to have another day off in the week, so they're not necessarily working 7 days?
I think that's down to us to negotiate, isn't it? You know, I know we did that at Thriller. We did 5 out of 7 on Thriller, and we did the Monday concerts out on single time. But then again, we knew we were doing that, and we had other benefits to compensate for it.
Mm.
So, you know, we negotiated that with them at that point. So I think that's going to have to be done there. I can't see we can cover all the bases, because obviously, you know, all these different things come up all the time. So unless they turned around and said it's on a 6 day, but for anybody working on a 6 day week, that would be a 7th day. So it'd be double time instantly, wouldn't it? The 5 day weeks would, the full time staff would probably end up, I know after we agreed for whatever benefits, I'm not going to go into what we had, but we you know, what we did. I know other shows in my company then negotiated to do the Mondays on time and a half, regardless of what, you know, how many days they worked.
Mm.
So, you know, it depends how much they want to do their Monday concerts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not taking away the fact that this is a minimum terms agreement and everything's up for negotiation. It's still up for negotiation. All we're actually talking about here is the idea of working a Sunday as part of the normal working week. That's what we're talking about. Run a show Sundays. We're not.
I hate Sundays, so I'm you know, I only do it for the money. You know, if I get the choice of taking a show that's a Monday to Saturday show run, I'll do that over a Sunday. And then every so often I dip in because the show is particularly interesting, knowing that I've probably only got a year's, you know, in me to do Sundays, because it just ruins my social life. I did see an interesting question in the question and answers about whether if there's a vaccine and things go back to normal by, say, June 2021, would SOLT still make us do the Sundays until 2022? So, you know, is there a get out clause in the variations theme that if it all goes away and there is a vaccine, then this automatically gets thrown out and we leap back into the current agreement?
There isn't at the moment. That is something that we have said on numerous occasions, that actually we think that there should be an earlier trigger than January 2022 in the event that something like that happened. I think they accused me of living in cuckoo land, and didn't I understand the severity of what I was talking about? So they actually belittled the argument, but we've made it on numerous occasions. You know, it is there, and again, you know, this is why it's so difficult to actually to do these things and try and get some sense checks. It's because it's still very much up in the air. We still, well, ifs and buts and things like that. So, you know, we are trying to look at getting the best deal that we can, that ultimately will be voted on by our members. I don't know who wants to answer this point, but somebody, well, it's more than one individual actually, has said that they're worried that what's the point in the SOLT BECTU agreement if we can be bullied into having to accept changes, and also that they don't feel that we're doing enough. So Claire,
right, okay, so this is my thing as a producer employee. I have no job security. I have to sell myself for a job every time I go up for a new show, as does wigs, dressers, stage automation. We are all going into jobs fresh. If we had to go in without the agreement, we'd be going in on minimum pay, or we'd have to negotiate up from minimum pay. We wouldn't have any of these extra things of like, oh, you automatically go into time and a half on your 6th day and double time on your 7th day. All that would be gone. You would be going right back to the basics of employment law, which is so much less than we have with the agreement. I mean, it's not perfect, the agreement, and you know, there's always been a certain amount of wiggle room, both from producers and theatre managers and staff, on how you can sort of negotiate it for the particular show you're doing. But the agreement is so much more than basic employment entitlement. So, you know, at the moment, it gives you something to work from, and you're working from a higher point than the minimums. So, you know, I love the agreement because I've been offered some really shitty deals in the past, and I've been able to turn around and say, oh, actually, that's less than the SOLT BECTU agreement. And 99% of the time, the management's come back to me and gone, oh, yes, we didn't read it properly. We're terribly sorry. It wasn't deliberate at all. It was our ignorance, and we'll offer you the right deal. So I think the agreement offers a lot more than we would get just as a basic employee. Sorry, that's my tuppence worth.
Yeah, but the thing is, we don't find any of these options we're discussing particularly palatable. I don't want to be sitting up here talking about less pay in any circumstances. But the thing is, it's in our interest to get some agreement with SOLT because of the reasons Claire's just said. Because there's certain companies that would probably love to be outside SOLT, and you know, so it's in all our interest to try and get something, a mutual agreement that we can stay within SOLT. This is why we're doing these polls. It doesn't say we're going to agree to all this as it stands. It's just to get an understanding of where we sit bottom line in order to try and get an agreement so that we can stay within that SOLT collective.
And look, I'm not going to mention any names, but we already know several producers who are talking about just ditching the whole SOLT BECTU agreement and just going off on their own, making their own, you know, their own deals and their own. And I guarantee none of them will be as good as what we're talking about now. There's a question on here I'd just like to bring up. It says, with all due respect, I'm failing to see what's been achieved on the BECTU side. They can now make us do extra work for the same cost. We're now on lower pay. We can now be moved on. Sorry, but I'm not impressed and don't feel comforted by the promises of revenge. There'll be a point at some point in the very near future where there'll be more redundancies, and at the point where some of us have spent a lot of time and a lot of miserable time trying to help people out through their redundancies in the last couple of weeks. You know, I think BECTU has done quite well out of what we've been able to fight with, because the one thing we got to fight with, we haven't got in our armory anymore. None of us are in work. We're all sitting at home making these calls. We're not in work in our offices making these calls or in our workplaces. I'm sat in my living room. So there's very little to fight with, and we've managed to do quite a lot, I think, with the little that we've got. We managed to keep them in the box a little bit, you know, because if we hadn't, they'd be riding roughshod over everything you can possibly think of. They take away every single right you can think of and just throw it in the bin. And so far, you know, we've managed to keep them slightly on track, let's say that. And we're not finished yet. We're still carrying on doing what we're doing, and we're still trying to fight hard for the people out there to come back to a job, basically. But, you know, make no bones about it, there won't be any if we don't carry on doing what we're doing. Well, not one's worth having anyway. But Claire's right, we'll be on minimum wage. Take a look at what's happening in the regions with UK theatre agreements, and then come back to me and tell me that this thing isn't worth fighting for.
Thank you. We've got just over 10 minutes left to answer questions. So there's a couple of questions in about minimum calls, and would they be varied? We haven't talked about minimum calls. That has not been part of the discussions or any attempts to look at revisiting those. So those parts of the agreement would remain intact. There's other queries about working time regulations, and that is one of the points that we have been making all the way through these discussions, that yes, everybody, from what I can see, is required to opt out of the working time regulations. But in going forward, with all these changes, we need to look at what those opt-outs actually mean. There has to be a maximum, and also the big concerns that we have about any controls on, especially those people who are on buyouts. Where it just says we buy out all your overtime, but it doesn't tell you how much overtime is bought out. We've been very clear that anything going forward on the buyouts has to be precise, has to be clearly put into the offer. And if it's not in the offer, then the position we will take, and we will advise our members to take, is that if it's silent, it's not included, and therefore the SOLT BECTU agreement conditions prevail. So we will be putting out more advice on buyouts and things, but I am also concerned about the working time regulations, and we have raised that and said that going forward we need to have more controls put in, but we haven't yet discussed what that could be, how it could work or anything. And I know I've spent quite a bit of time talking to Claire about the buyouts, and also Chris Davis about the buyouts, and how I dislike them immensely, but also how they get operated and effectively how they get abused. So I don't know whether anybody wants to add any more on that. No?
Worth saying anything about, obviously, just about a bit more about minimum calls. I mean, as my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen and Glenn, is that, yeah, all of us, anything on a Sunday other than the 8 hours pay for basic would remain, so all the minimum calls would remain intact. If there was a second call, we'd still be if we had a second call, say an overnight call with the show going out after a Sunday night, we'd still be looking at double time, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we haven't even touched on any of that. All we're actually touching on is the idea that what they want is to be able to do Sunday shows for single time. That's what they've asked us for. That's what they're insisting on. They keep on banging on about it like a shithouse door in a gale, right? And to be quite frank, I'm sick of it. But this is what they're talking about. It's a single time for running Sunday shows. That's what we've talked about. That's what we asked you guys about, you know, the people out in the webinar. That's what we're asking about. So all the other stuff is up for negotiation, or we just say we're not going to talk to you about it and we're just going to leave it alone.
So would that mean a show call would still be 4.5 hours for a Sunday, even though it was paid at single?
I don't know, Claire, to be honest. I mean, you know, I'm doing this the same as you are. I have to find out from them what they want.
I feel personally a producer would say it's a normal working day, we're paying you for your 8 shows and we're not going to pay you for the longer call. That's my idea of what they'll do.
But if they're only paying you for the 8 shows, you only have to work the 8 shows hours, don't you?
Yeah, but on Sunday currently we have a 4.5 hour show call.
Right.
So that's in the agreement that show people get, instead of their 3 3/4 or a 3 hour call, I think it is for the crew, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's also a difference. If they say, oh, well, we're not paying the 4.5 hour call because it's a normal show on a normal day.
Yeah.
I think a lot of producers will turn around and say, well, we're not paying 4.5 hours, even though that hasn't been mentioned from them at all. I just
we need to clarify going forward. I think that's right.
I think the point, because a lot of questions here are talking as though this is a sort of finished variation that we're going to take back. This is not a finished variation. This is just finding out what the bottom line is in order to work through. So a lot of these sort of fine details, obviously we've still got to work out. It's just to find out the sort of bottom simple idea of single time on a Sunday, whether people would be prepared to do that or not. Obviously there's lots of kind of nuances and things within that will need to be worked out if people are. This is not a finished thing. It's just finding out where we're at in terms of if people will be, up for it or not. It's not really a choice. I don't think it's a choice between this, what we're discussing, or just keeping things as they are. That's not going to be an option. And we've got to somehow work through this, all these details, once we've worked out the bottom line.
It's also, can I stress, not an offer by SOLT. This is something that, I don't even know whether SOLT would offer this. We might have done this. We've got our bottom line. I go back to SOLT and say, this is our bottom line. So bottom line means bottom line. Don't come back with 0.1% on top for Sundays or something like that. This is our bottom line. And, it can't be varied any further. But they might just say no.
Very well, will they?
There's a question on here on asking what percentage of people on this webinar currently work a Sunday show? Asking a webinar of 200 people, many of whom may not work a Sunday, is hardly a fair or honest reaction, is it? Well, I certainly work a double show Sunday, which means I'm in for 3 sessions. So I am in first thing in the morning doing laundry and then 2 shows. I have a feeling that some managements who didn't have Sunday shows before may want to do Sunday shows when they come back because they want to get the footfall. So this could affect anybody, you know, whether you've had a Sunday show in the past or not. If they want to sell tickets, they might decide that a Sunday is a better day, and the extra money is always put some of the smaller managements off for the smaller shows because they don't make money on it, you know. But if it's part of the normal week, they may decide that all their shows are going to be a Tuesday, Sunday week. So, you know, don't take it for granted that your Sunday is sacred because you haven't ever done it on a play before, because it might end up coming in if it's single money. So please be honest, you know.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, to be fair to Claire, I know you've been having separate webinars with some of, well, Zoom meetings and things with some of the people in the branch who are in costume and wardrobe, and you've been getting feedback from them. I know Joe's been talking to his colleagues and things. So we are also getting feedback from our reps, and whether that be through different social media platforms and things. So it's not just purely on this, but the last webinar we didn't do any polls, and there was quite a lot of questions saying, why can't we have any polls and why can't we vote on it? So that's reasons why we did this, to allow you to vote on it. Ultimately, it will go, any changes will go out to the entire membership of the branch. So everybody then can vote. So, you know, and even then, not everybody's going to vote. So anyway, so Glenn, I don't know whether, or any of the other panelists, we're coming up to the end of the session now. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to answer all of the questions that have come in. They've certainly come through thick and fast into the Q&A part. So I apologise that we haven't been able to answer all the questions nor the points raised, but we have tried to summarise some of the themes that have been coming through. So Glenn, do you want to add anything?
I wanted to ask Zoe, is it possible, just one more time, because there's a question that's saying, can we clarify what the poll results were? Can we run through 1, 2, and 3 what the percentages were, and just quickly
Hi Ben, yeah, I was literally just doing that. I was just trying to write them out so I could easily just read them out, but I thought it was easier to do it with the amount of people that have actually said what they've gone for. So the first one was a permanent change,
yeah,
and 6 people said yes. 174 people said no, and 11 people said don't know. For the second one about the temporary variation until January 2022, 105 people said yes, 64 people said no, and 29 said don't know. And the last question about the premium payment on top, it was 106 people said yes, 76 said no, and 20 said don't know.
okay. And just for my brain, what are the percentages?
So for the first one, it was 3% said yes and 91% said no, 6% said don't know.
Yeah.
And then the second question, 53% yes, 32% no, and 15% don't know. And then the last one, 53% said yes, 38% said no, and 10% said don't know. But I've written them all down so I can send them to you, Glenn, as well, just so you. I've
Okay,
them, so I thought it was easier.
So what will happen now is that myself and Glenn will, we'll speak to Wayne. We will be due to have another meeting of the negotiating committee, I suppose sometime this week. But it does give us a clear indication, well, an indication of where we can look at trying to negotiate. to get a movement, but it also tells us that we could not go any lower than what we're actually looking at here. So so that's the next steps. So it's going to be a watch this space again. I'm afraid things do move sort of quite quickly, and you know, sometimes we go radio silence, but that's not because we're not telling you anything. That's usually because SOLT are sitting there pondering with the fluff in their navel and deciding what to say to us. So as soon as we hear back or we've got anything to report back to you, we'll either communicate via email, call another webinar, or please watch the West End Theatre's web Facebook page. I know that there's quite a lot of stuff that gets posted on there, but always speak to your reps as well. But what I'd like to say is thank you for participating and taking the time to join the session today. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.